It's Creepy Create Day! Okay, so for this spell book, I am using this cardboard book box that I picked up at the thrift store. And the first thing I needed to do was cut off the ribbon. Once that was dry, I just sanded off the excess around the edges and then sealed it with a little bit of Mod Podge. Okay, so now I want to start making some wounds in this face. I've got a cotton ball that I unrolled, and I'm just cutting open the raised areas of the latex wig. Not wig, but the wig cap. And I'm putting some Mod Podge down in the opening and then putting the cotton pieces down in there. It will give me something to adhere my fake blood to. So I just worked my way around doing different sizes, envisioning infected lacerations that I could either stitch or staple shut or partially shut, so that it could look like he's pretty beat up. So here I'm trying to show you the outline of this face. To me, looks like there's a mouth right there, and that's his chin and his eyeball there. So this is like a fish person type face. That's what I saw, so that's what I'm going to go with, and I'm going to give it some teeth. So I'm using the artificial fingernails and just trimming them down to look like kind of funky, almost human teeth, but not quite. And then I can just hot glue those into place. So now that I have the teeth in place, I'm taking some more of the toilet paper and building up around what would be like the gum and lip area above and below the teeth. And then from there, I just go ahead and fill in the rest of the face with the toilet paper and the Mod Podge. So now I'm taking some air dry clay and a stamp that just has some writing on it, and I want to make that impression into my air dry clay. I do a couple of them because I want to pick the best one, and then I will be putting that on the front of my book. And I'm just pressing it down around the edges to smooth it into the surface of the book cover. And now I'm just adding some more of the tissue paper and Mod Podge. So now I've got one of the wounds is larger than the others, so I thought it'd be cool to have some bugs crawling out of his face. So I've got these little ants plastic ants that I'm just hot gluing into that space. And then I'm just adding another little critter up at the top of the book. And then some black string for the spider. So now I'm just doing more of the toilet paper and Mod Podge around that clay that I put on there so that I can just blend that more so into the front of this book so that it blends more into the wrinkled texture that's already on there. So now we're back to the eyeball, and I'm using this embroidery floss to give the bloodshot eye look. A lot of people use red yarn, which frays a lot easier and looks more realistic. I didn't have that, so I'm just working with what I have. There are some great tutorials out there on making these eyeballs that are much better than mine. Ace of Clay and Unhinged Productions come to mind. They make some great eyeballs. You guys should check them out. But I'm just fraying it the best I can. I separated some of the strands on the single strand itself. I tore that apart, and then I'm trying to fray the edges a little bit to get that look, and just using my Mod Podge to glue those on there. Once that was dry, I'm going in with some paint. I mixed a dark yellow called yellow ochre with some of the sunny yellow and watered it down. I'm trying to get some color on there, but not solid color, so I'm misting it with my water mister to just kind of hopefully just blend it out so that it's not quite so solid. And it was still too bright, so I am going in with some light brown paint and then misting that off as well. I just work with this until I get the color that I'm somewhat happy with. And so now I want to build up that big wound with the ants, make it look like there's like this big gaping flesh hanging out around the bugs. So I've got some cheesecloth, and with my Mod Podge, I'm just going to start playing that around the opening and partially covering up the bugs so that it gives more of a look that they're climbing out of an open wound. And it just takes a lot of back and forth fiddling with it and getting it to stand up. It takes a little work, but it turned out pretty good. And so now I'm just going to apply some of the glossy glaze over the eyeball. Now with my tacky glue, I want to apply this aquarium gravel over the face to kind of look like, like barnacles, or I don't know, just something kind of gross. Just another layer of texture for my creepy face. And here I'm just gluing in the eyeball. Now it's time for some Fright Props blood. So with a fine tip brush, I'm just getting a good base coat of that onto the cotton that's inside of those wounds. So now I'm going to build up around the eyeball with the rolled up toilet paper and the Mod Podge. And now I'm just adding in a little more on top of it to make it look like an eyelid. I'm going to put in some creases and wrinkles. I use my little knife there to add in some extra depth. And then just continue building out and smoothing it down so that it all blends together. And so now I'm going to use my Candy Leather gel stain in Saddle Tan to do the book edges where the paper is. This stuff works really nice. It gives a very aged, realistic look. Now I'm taking my cheesecloth and I'm going to put this over, I'm going to cover the face with the exception of the eyeball and the wounds. So I just need to trim it so that it fits somewhat appropriately. And I'm just going to Mod Podge that down over the face, and pushing with my brush, I'll be pushing it around all those little aquarium gravel pieces so that you get this really nice texture. And that will also help make sure that those stay on there and don't pop off. Now I'm going to add some of these adhesive gems to the spine of my book. Now it's time to paint our book. I'm using a dark brown called Espresso. Once that was dry, I got the Tandy Leather Saddle Tan again and went over the brown, and I brush it on and then wipe off the excess. I just kind of want to work it down into all those areas where you can see the variations in the paint, how it adhered to the tissue paper. It gives it a very leathery-like look. I absolutely love it. For the face, I want to start off with this green called Timberline Green. I'm just going to be filling in around some of the recessed areas. Not total coverage by any means, just getting a little green color on there. And then next is an antique gold color that I'll be applying with a sponge. And I'm using that on the teeth as well. Then with the brush, I decide to go ahead and kind of put a little more around the outline of the face and fill in some areas on the face that maybe didn't have enough already on there from the sponge. And now I'm just painting the eyelid with a kind of a tan color, and then working my way around the lower lid as well. And so now I'm going to go in with these two gray colors. One is actually a gray, and then the other one is more of a taupe. And I'm just going to kind of not mix them together, but do one and then the other using the same brush, so it's kind of mixing. I just want to blend all that in there really well to give lots of depth and color variation. And then I gotta also brush a little bit on those two first too. And here I have my Tandy Leather gel again. I'm watering it down just a little bit. I didn't know how strongly this would cover the paint, and I didn't want it to completely block it out, so I started off with it really watered down, so I could see how it goes, and then I could add more of the stain, making it darker as I needed to. Looking pretty grody, just the way I like it. Time to paint the letters. I'm going to go in with my black craft paint. The last thing I do is add a little bit of brown paint around the staples and a little bit of metallic paint highlighting on the lettering, and that's it. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.